Welcome, everyone, to this edition of System Override. What a week it's been. How are you doing, Bree?
Well, like we mentioned, Shannon, it's been a busy week and I'm a little fatigued because sometimes when the opportunity presents itself, you just got to do what you got to do. And if that means going to Ducky's to try to make a deal late at night and coming home at 1 a.m. last night, that's what you do.
Yes, and for anyone who's been to Ducky's, shout out to Ducky's, the karaoke bar here in Calgary. It is a place where all business deals should be made.
Honestly, I think all business deals should be made at Ducky's. It really creates a great environment to have some really good conversations. So
Yeah.
like there's something about the karaoke and the lack of like the lessening of inhibitions maybe and the amount that people are drinking a little extra because they're nervous about when they're going to go do their karaoke. It all combines into something
And there's
highly
no
impactful.
barriers. Did you ever think about it? It's like it's a bar with, it's wide open. There's no walls so that everybody can see the people that are singing. Obviously, it's good for acoustics, which it does not have good acoustics, So I think it does create this environment where there's lots of free flow. There's no place to hide, and the staff is great, and
Yeah.
the singing is exceptional as long as I'm
There
not
were
singing.
a couple, there were actually like some pretty good, I'd say on a Thursday, it seemed like the more serious talent was out because there were some really good singers there.
Yeah,
So I was like, I'm
that's
impressed.
good.
Yeah,
That's very fun.
yeah.
Okay, let's get at it. So last week we challenged everyone for the big action was to think about three skills they're really good at and three that they're not, and then think about if AI can help them or replace any of that work in the as we move through forward. What did you come up with?
Yes, this is the perfect time for me in my life because for me, I am a very big thinker kind of style person. I am definitely undiagnosed ADHD. And all of these kind of things. And so AI is the perfect time for me because the things I'm really good at are the people skills and the connecting skills. The things that I am shit at are like my organizational, like my email, like my, keeping track of the minutia of my calendar and the day to day. And so for me, AI can help me immensely in spaces where I'm not strong and I've had to rely on, having a really great person, I'm best as a crew, like with Emma. Emma's my forever soulmate because she is my matching box. And
That's
now
right.
Emma gets to like, have AI like do that for me and her not needing to be so much helping to wrangle me.
This is why teams have different types
Right?
of people on them,
Exactly.
right? And
How do
it's so
you?
funny. I do think that is why I've been a fan of AI since sort of the first time I ever heard about this technology. Because as like you, my very people,
Hmm.
people relationship skills, my ability to drive business forward through human interaction
Hmm.
are all things that I'm really good at and always have been, but have always known that those things are very difficult to quantify and measure.
Hmm.
Therefore, less credit is given to them
Yes.
than, really hard, you know, easier to measure things that are
Mhm.
task based. And so, similar to you, like I might have like 2,500 email that have not been read in
Definitely.
my personal email, not my work email. But right, like
This is a
I'm
good
like
thing.
you,
Let's
like
look up how many unread in personal emails. That will indicate to you if AI is a good tool for you. I don't even know. I also always have, yeah, I have 9,707 unread emails in
yeah,
my personal
see,
email.
and see, like, and Emma said to me the other day, she's like, well, you can, we can just build a agent for that, and I said, yeah, I'm waiting for Gemini because I want that bot to be inside my email
Yeah,
already. But
yeah.
when that agent is ready to go, man, I will be the first on board.
Here's one taking care of that.
I wanted to make all the decisions on whether an email needs my attention or not.
Part of my goals in my like leadership and executive journey is just to get to a point where I have a personal assistant because I know how wonderful that will be for my life when I can have someone to help me do these things. It'll be good for my marriage. They'll take care of my parking tickets. You know, Chris doesn't need to concern himself with that anymore.
But that's funny because I was talking to one of our favorite chief people officers yesterday, and she's got a new chief of staff, and she was saying that how much a godsend that person has been in just not paying her parking tickets. That's not what that person does, but just like organize, like just coming to her with like great data, great
Hmm.
insights,
Yeah.
proactively being able to get ahead of some stuff
Yeah.
that, having a partner like that in work today, what a great
Huge.
advantage. Yeah. Yeah, it is huge. Okay, so hopefully everybody out there had a time to really think about those skills. And if they are ones that can be replaced by AI, think about the fact that you get to now spend more time developing these softer skills, or the more people focused skills, and how are you going to be able to do that, because those are really important. And I don't think any of us see a day where talking, like interacting with AI and having a it will ever elevate to a place where having that same in the moment conversation with a human will be.
Yeah. 100%.
Okay, what was in the news this week? Oh, we got some doozies again. So the first story that we're going to look at is as a survey that came out of resumebuilder.com, and it talked about this new phenomenon called AI job hacking hijacking. And what that means is that employees are using AI to take over tasks of like a peer so that they look like they're doing more and they've created more and this other person has less to do. And I read this and went, what? That's not an AI story. Workplace mishaps have been happening for as long as I've been a leader.
Called workplace politicking, and it's been
Right?
a long thing.
This feels just like a human story of bad behavior. What do you think, Brie?
Yeah, I would agree. And I think this is like kind of ties back to that overarching thread where we talk about AI is kind of like the hot buzzword. And so, like,
Yeah.
a lot of things are being attributed to it, but like, it's not causational. Like, AI is not causing it, but it is
Mm-hmm.
certainly it's in the news. Like, news stories will sell. If this opens up a whole other thing you can talk about now because you can put it on AI or attach it to
Right.
AI, but it's not causational. Like Shannon said, like my entire career, like stuff like this happens. You know what I mean? And it comes down, it's just, it wasn't done through this AI hacky way. It was done through, like smear campaigns essentially, and like
Yeah.
people getting in
Undermining.
behind the scenes and bad talking and setting perceptions and creating these things to try and do that when there were colleagues or things that they didn't like align with or wanted to see a change with. Like I saw this in spades. So I think to your point, this isn't a new thing, and this certain isn't an AI thing. It's just humans, much in the same thread of what did you do last week? The how did you think of skills you could translate into AI? Well, some little evil geniuses here were like, hey, why am I doing this the old-fashioned way? I'm spending hours running around, doing this. I can now use AI to create some of this story and proof points that I'm trying to do. But I think there is something that is the most important thing to lean into under this. Like if I'm a company or an enterprise, is just these numbers are very high. You've got 60% of people who are, concerned about this or like things that are happening, and then up to 75% if the company had already done previously layoffs. And so I think
Mm-hmm.
it's just from an overall temperature check, like your teams are not at their best right now. Your teams are in a moment of survival mode and trying to ensure that they can survive through uncertainty and through change. And so, one, do you think that they're showing up their best? Like, okay, so that person's fucking around trying to figure out how to get Ted fired. Like, do you think they're doing their best working for you to get your stuff done? Like, no, they're just working to make sure that Ted gets fired before them. And so,
Exactly.
how can you think about, like, one, when there's that, like, what does communication look like? What does engagement look like? What does trust building look like for you right now? Because this is a very high proof point of waste happening in your organization right now, waste of uncertainty, waste of productivity, waste of moving ahead, and also just waste in like and lack of care in, or not lack of care, I guess, because you might not be aware, but like lack of management of how to support your workforce in a time of great change. What do you think?
Yeah, I think that this has been going on for decades, probably longer than that, but it's just that this is the tone for bad behavior like this in an organization is set by the leadership team, particularly the C-suite team, and it's all about the culture that they decide to create by their actions. And if if the C-suite is being, or senior executive are being very transparent about what's happening in the organization, being very forthcoming, having lots of empathy about the situation, coming up with innovative ways for their people to feel like they understand their impact that they're having in the company, their value to the company, what they want them to do with the AI tools, and how it really can enhance and move the business forward. If you're not creating that kind of culture, then employees they'll get influenced by all the other things that people are telling them. Like, I've been in lots of companies where massive layoffs have happened and that sort of thing. And when it's done really well, it
Mhm.
doesn't cause any fear. There's sadness because obviously you are losing people in your organization, and that's a life-changing event. And sometimes they're your friends, and that's also, you feel bad about that. But I've never actually been in a situation where we did that and then the company was worse for it,
Mhm.
right? We might have had maybe lack of a certain skill or something for a short period of time while people got up to speed. But for the most part, there's a lot of thought and care taken into those kind of situations. And as long as leaders are being communicative and doing a great job, it doesn't have the same impact. It
Yeah.
has people understand that by knowing how to own their value, knowing where the company's direction is and being part of that movement,
Mhm.
that job is important, right? And their work is important to the company. And that kind of culture will always win in any kind of situation. AI just happens to be the buzzword right now,
Yeah.
but there's always strain on businesses. And that's why so much communication and just knowing your people and those relationships that between executives and workers
Mhm.
need to be so strong.
Yeah. Well, and I do 100% agree that at the end of the day, like this is all just changes, pretty
Hmm.
significant changes happening to how we do work. And what we're seeing is like it all comes back to culture, is how you weather that change. And so I'm really excited to see the culture aspect, like I'm seeing it become such a strong pillar, like defensively, you know what I mean, at this
Hmm.
time. Whereas before, I feel like people were either like very waffly, like in the culture camp or not, and making it feel like it was like, like crystals or voodoo or something, and not necessarily like a thing, even though there's science around it, there's proven things around it. But I think at the end of the day, this is such a good indicator of like the value of culture and how culture supports you. And it's also like, I think when nothing's wrong, people are like, well, why invest in this? Why put money into
Yeah.
this? Because everything's like going tickety boo. But I think we can't expect, especially with how things are going, how quickly things and changes can happen. Culture is going to become more and more of a key importance, because to navigate any organization through change, you're going to need to have very strong
Yeah.
trust, very strong culture. And I mean, that's obviously something we're very passionate about at League, because we're very focused on that bridge
Hmm.
between employee and company and executive layer, to actually build that kind of trust and be an enabler of that in a new way. And so that is something that I think all companies, if you're a company now, I think it's like, think about it also in the terms of like, okay, if you're seeing these things, or like this is kind of things happening underneath of you, what does that mean for you and what do you need to do? If you're an employee doing this, knock it off, first of all. Don't.
Try
Secondly,
to just be a good employee.
Well, I think it's more like your energy is better spent. Like, can you
Right.
spend your energy doing this? Sure, but it's very short-sighted in near term because it's like you might win the battle, but you're not going to win the war because the skills of the future are your people skills. I'm going to
Yeah.
guess your people skills are a little low if this is your first solution. Probably not the best one to lead with. And so it's more around like, how are you? What I'm hearing from an individual in this situation is like you're stressed and you're worried and you're trying to create a sense of control over the situation. So how can you do that productively rather than
Yeah.
this? This might get you a short-term win. Maybe you get Ted fired. Maybe Ted deserved to get fired. I don't know. But
Ted.
at the end of the day, the next step, there's going to always be another Ted. There's going to always be another
Yeah.
situation and you're going to have like a ceiling that you can do this. You can only do this so many times. And then the more you start doing this, the more someone's just going to fucking do it to you, bro. It's called karma and that shit's going to come back. So, like use your energy more productively, I would say. If you're an employee in this situation and that is the solution you're turning to, there's definitely other things that you could be looking at here as far as creating your own control and your own path and your own way. Like, just level up, level yourself up, and you'll be good.
And you know what's interesting is like as you were saying that, telling that, you know, talking about what you were just saying about poor Ted, I was thinking that you know what is always a challenge in these situations where we lead with culture and we talk to executives and say, you know, culture is where you need to really lean in and that's how you de-risk your organization
Mhm.
from things like turnover, bad you know, behavior like this, having to you know lay off people because your productivity you're not your people aren't getting you the outcomes that you need them to and it's and I know that people think okay well yeah we got good culture it's all good but
Mhm.
there's no way to physically measure culture with the exception of a story that as you were saying that came to mind is I always reflect back on the CEO of Airbnb when we were during COVID
Mhm.
and he had to lay off a huge amount of his people because obviously Airbnb was drastically impacted by COVID overnight.
Yeah,
And he put out that letter to
I
his
was scary.
entire staff, like he put it on
Yes.
LinkedIn
Yeah.
and let the whole world see what happened, why he had to do it, how he selected the departments that had to
Yeah.
be closed down,
Yeah.
and then put out a message to the rest of the tech world
Hmm.
to go and hire
Help
his
them. Yeah.
people,
Yeah.
right? Which, as you think about it, other tech companies were soaring. Like, you know, some of them doubled their staffing in a matter of weeks
Yeah.
because there's the need for, you know, more security on the laptops, being able to, like, hardware needed to be, was being taken off. You could get a laptop, right? So that everybody could work from home. And I thought, and, you know, so of course his valuation of his company went down.
Hmm.
I might get this wrong, but I think he would recently IPO'd or was in the process of IPOing or raising. Like there was it was an impact. The valuation was a big impact to him. But you go and look at Airbnb today, like he got that revenue back in just like I don't know, hundredfold. But because now people want to work there, they love that culture. He gets the highest quality of people working for that organization because of what he did and
Hmm.
that signal about the culture and how transparent he expects himself and his other executive team to be. And that's just it does pay back. It just obviously has a little bit maybe longer payback cycle.
Totally. And like, I almost think of it like I believe culture is inherently essential because I don't want to just, keep things moving. I want it to excel. And so, like, culture is your lever to make things excel. But even if that's not your thing, maybe you don't necessarily believe in that excel piece. I think at the very least, if you're a leader, you need to think about culture as like an insurance policy at the very least, because what
Yeah,
happens when
that's a
change
great way.
happens and things are uncertain for people? They go to it's the Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Immediately they're in, stress, they're going for survival, just like base, I need to feed myself, my family. What does that do to an individual? They collapse. They're not performing, they're just guarding. They're doing this like and seeing that in corporates all the time, even just through layoffs. Like when it's uncertain and people aren't communicated to, like they don't get the chance to go through that. You're always going to storm and norm through something, and I think they avoid saying anything because they're scared of having that like why is this happening, and awkward conversations and things like that. But you're not letting your people go through that process then into acceptance. Like
Yeah,
you're not letting them flow past it to
that's
a
a good
place
point.
where they can rationalize and accept and move ahead. You're keeping them frozen in a position of always feeling uncertain and like they don't know what's going to happen and having a guard. And so you're pretty much putting your whole organization at a standstill. And with the pace of change that we're seeing, with companies, with the market, with global, economic things that are happening, change will be much more frequent. So unless you want to be a company holding still all day, every day, I think you're going to have to start thinking about this as an insurance policy at the very least. But I would argue this is going to become a competitive indicator because we are not going to be able to just flop along anymore.
Yeah.
Competitiveness will be at a much higher rate, and this will just be a key to being competitive.
Yeah, that's a great point. Okay, let's jump over to another story, which I think was cool. This week there was a book released called Open to Work: How to Get Ahead in the Age of AI, written by an executive from Microsoft and from one from LinkedIn. And it really breaks down an actual framework for how someone could think about using AI in their day, and you build the framework and the plan over 90 days. And I thought, that's very cool. This is like really giving somebody a sustainable way of thinking and implementing and reducing their concern or fear around the tool.
Yeah.
What do you think?
I also love that this is something that, we're starting to invest that thought leadership in down to that individual levels. Obviously, something we're very passionate about and ensuring that. The one thing I still find like a little hilarious, and I'm maybe just too in sales mode because of my late sales night, but I feel like everything's tying back to league for me in this way today.
Everything's about revenue.
Always be closing, Shannon, always be selling. But like with this, the one thing I laugh about is it's like, okay, so here's the most revolutionary technology, and here is, the new shift. This is going to be the biggest thing for us since the industrial area. How are you going to figure this out for yourself? Go read about it. Spend a lot of time manually turning pages, reading and digesting, and then figuring out how you turn that into something for yourself. And that's what makes me laugh. And if you're like, what the hell are you talking about, Brianna? It's like, because our whole experience with League is to actually turn that kind of learning and implementation into a real time productized experience that takes away some of the work for you to develop yourself in that way and to grow. And so that's why I'm laughing at this, because it's like, and like laughing on two sides, laughing that that's the go to solution, fucking like laughing for us as we move forward, because it's like, yes, this is 100% like a big gap, and I just love that I'm seeing this reaffirmed in like how to let me get your 10,000 page manual out and chapter 1. Sit down, children. Story time all around. This will only take 25 hours to do. We definitely have that time today, so let's do it.
10 and a half. I checked it on audiobooks.
10 and a half what? Hours?
Hours.
Yeah, 10 and a half fucking hours. You have AI that's just supposed to help you do things in minutes, and our solution is to spend 10 and a half hours learning how to use the AI.
Well, and ultimately, you could just ask AI to tell you how to use the
Yeah,
AI.
you could. I mean, wait. I mean, everyone and their dog is making a book these days, so everyone's
Yeah,
got a
it is
cookie
true.
with that.
Podcasts and books, right?
Guess who
They're the
knows? I mean, we're
go-to.
just as guilty. Here's our freaking podcast. And
Well,
the
as
amount
you
of
were
times I've
saying
had
that, I was
someone
like,
say, maybe you're going to write a book, and it's like,
maybe
you
we
know
should
what?
write a book.
I mean, that would be, I feel like you
How to
have to, like, just
jumpstart
on
your career.
principle alone. I can't because it feels like the new MBA. You know what I mean? It's like,
God, yeah.
did you get an MBA? Did you read a book? It's like, I can't join that club just on principle. I don't have
Yeah.
an MBA out of principle. Like, I could have done the 1 year, and like, because I already have a BCom, I half did the
Right.
MBA courses, and they're like, you can do the executive fast track. It's just like, no, I'm sorry. I stand for something right now, and it is like not doing these bullshit MBAs. That
Yeah.
might hurt me in the long run, but I don't think it will. And I think this is the
It
stupidest
won't.
signal that everyone is like, and I'm tired of meeting a 22-year-old who's like, well, I'm an MBA. And it's like, cool, you've never had a job before, so I don't like that was never the point of an MBA. Like an MBA was to level you up once you had a bunch of work experience.
That used to be actually the you used to have to go and work and then until you could actually apply. right?
Yeah,
Didn't you have to
exactly. Like it
work a
was
certain
never
number
like
of
that over the
years
head
before you
thing.
could,
Yeah,
yeah, before you could before you could apply even for an MBA? Oh, I know. But we all know now that it's all about revenue generation,
it is.
ultimately.
It is.
That is, it has really nothing to do with the fact that there's very little difference between an MBA and a BCom.
There is literally like
Not
one course.
not an executive MBA or like a very leadership, like those kind of very deep, different type of MBAs are very,
But to be honest, when I looked at the course curriculum, like I would say there was 60 to 75% overlap. So it's like, why would I
it's
spend
really,
this much money to essentially
yeah.
just redo my degree with a couple
I've
extra?
never understood why it was an add-on to BCom. I understood like why somebody with a engineering
Oh,
degree
100%.
and
That makes
then went to an MBA. That's
yeah.
perfect. Like that
Yeah.
totally makes sense to
Yeah.
me.
What's my MBA equivalent for the engineering side? Like I would love that.
Exactly.
You know what I
You
mean?
want
What's
to go
my,
be a master's of engineering?
no, I don't. But like what's my little, add-on that serves me to well
It's
round
quite
myself?
lucrative in this town, that
Yeah,
engineering degree.
that is true. That's my other principle though. As a token business person in oil and gas for so long, it's like I refuse. I refuse. I will not.
That said, one of the things that about this and your comment about, well, we're going to go back to the old way of reading a book, it is kind of funny how that to get change to happen for people, sometimes you have to put the most traditional thing, like we've had books for hundreds of thousands of years, in front of them in order to get them motivated in action to change. Which is an
Mhm.
interesting, like to all business leaders listening to this, as you're thinking about creating change for your team, as you're thinking about getting your product into market that maybe doesn't exist today,
Mhm.
is there ways to lever traditional means to reduce the friction of change on someone?
Yeah.
So it's an interesting thought.
Potentially. But it's like adult learners learn through doing. Like
Yeah.
theory is the least relevant to an adult learner. It is like it's just also crisscross applesauce. It's not even funny.
All right. Or you can just listen to it on your way to work every morning and then you can absorb it that way.
Yeah. Or just like get
Although it has action items in it, so it'd be really hard to action the action item while you're reading the book in your
yeah,
car or
right?
on the train or something. Anyways, okay. So first of all, I'm super excited about this. Did you know that May 1st was the 100th anniversary of us committing permanently to a 5-day work week as per Mr. Henry Ford? 100 years we've been working in a working model of a 5-day work week. What do you think?
Well, to that I asked Shannon when we were talking about the stories before this. I'm like, well, what was it before 5 days? And she's like, 7. I'm like, well, then we're moving incrementally in the right direction, unless you work in tech, in which case you've never
It's
stopped.
8.
Yeah, 8, 25. I don't know.
But you missed the part of why were we working 7 days a week? Because we were mostly farmers, right? But and farmers still work 7 days a week. But it is interesting because this story came out of our good friend at OpenAI. And this week he's talking about making a structural shift into a 4-day work week. And so, the first thing that always comes to everybody's mind is that, well, you're going to do 7 days worth of work in 4 days now instead of 5. So it just bloats into being longer days and less time. But it is interesting that a tech company would be thinking about a 4-day work.
I love this because like your ability to decouple your hours spent tied to the output you receive.
Your
Like
value.
like you know what I mean? Like in the Ford like industrialization of a car factory, the time you spent attaching a wheel to this was the output you got. If you could do
Right.
10 wheels attached, you got 10 wheels. And so I think what is so exciting about this is that time, to your point, like that is like a bridge kind of thought. I think it's like, oh well, we'll just have to do more with less, like
Right.
you know what I mean, with less. But it's actually, I'm gonna challenge and say you're gonna get to do like you're not going to be asked to do more within that same time frame because you can exponentially create outcomes now without having time be relevant to the
Right.
conversation. And so I think that's where I would challenge people who are thinking in that mindset, or if you're an individual kind of being a negative naysayer about it, being like, this is what's coming down the pipe for
Mm-hmm.
me. Like I would just challenge that and say, get more immersed in what this can mean for you and how you can start doing this today, because the second you can show, like, it's not just a that scenario. It's like you could 25x your outcomes, you could 100x your outcomes, you could 1000x your outcomes, and you could do that in minutes, hours, maybe a couple days. Like, it just depends on what you're working on. And so for that, I love that we're decoupling that. And I think the other thing with the culture piece, and also with moving into more of a creative space with AI from an
Yeah,
individual human perspective, it's that balance we talked about. You cannot keep pouring creativity nonstop. Our brains literally do not work that way.
that's
And
right.
we are all very socialized to the Hollywood idea of the brilliant writer and the writer's block, and they're listlessly crumpling their paper and meandering in their house coat and doing all that stuff because that's part of the process. And I think we
Mhm.
all need to get a little bit more aligned. Like, we're going to be in a more creative thinking space in this, but then your downtime is equally contributing to your work time. It's not sitting at the computer anymore. Like, the creative space is just being able to observe, absorb, give your brain rest time so that it can actually have fresh ideas. Like, and like me coming from an arts background, like, that's just like you just percolate. Like, you just have to
Mhm.
percolate, ruminate, putter around, just it, like, that's part of the process. And I think that's something that to me is very compelling, because that's something that I've always kind of operated in that model because of that arts background. But
Mhm.
I think that's something that's going to have to be new in the way we think about work. And that would be what I would be challenging everyone is like, a box is a box, but I'm saying, and you're trying to figure out how many ways this is going to become a rectangle, a square, everything has sharp corners. And I'm saying, no, this is like a fucking swoopy oval now. Like, you have to think about this
Yeah.
totally differently. And how can we challenge ourselves to do that?
But it's really interesting what you just said. Work has always been measured by these very compartmentalized items, whether it's time or tasks, right? Like, we've gotten to a place where people just made themselves look busy by doing tasks because that was the measurement for value.
Yes.
And now, as AI replaces and takes over having or eliminates those tasks that need
Mhm.
to be done, now your measurement of success and impact is not actually so physically seen. It
Yes.
can be, it could be sitting on a couch, spending some time just really thinking about something, not in front of the computer.
Hmm.
Actually, which in like today's day, that would look like lazy,
Yeah.
as
100%.
opposed to that's actually the place where you find the most ideas come into your head, right? Or it might be like an idea comes together over a period of days, and then all of a sudden that idea needs to be written down and it's 7 o'clock at night. Like, you're not constrained to the day, to the hours in the day for when those great ideas come forward, and you can now go and write for 3 hours
Hmm.
on whatever it is you were trying problem you were trying to solve. That kind of an environment to me is like freeing, and something that I think is long overdue.
Hmm.
But I think those are the barriers we are up against because we've been measured to our impact and our work and our salaries to an hour
Hmm.
or a task.
Yeah.
And now we got to break that norm down in a way. And by shrinking it to 4 days, you can
Hmm.
say 4 days, but it's really the way we work within
Yeah.
the time in a day
Yeah.
is the way that will actually measure the value and sustain the
Hmm.
compensation to that output. The compensation should never be tied to a time.
To a task. Well, and I
Yeah.
think that's where I think there's two camps probably of individuals, of how individuals feel on that. Either you're like us and I'm like, yes, so excited. This is like, I love this. Or it's very stressful and you're like, oh my God, because not a lot of
Yeah.
people have had to be measured by outcomes before. And that can feel really scary and very stressful. So I would say as an individual, like, if you're falling into that other camp of being like, "Oh my God, I don't want this
Yeah.
because I haven't had to operate this way. I don't know how to operate this way." And I'm resisting it on the fact that I'm uncomfortable. And so I think from that perspective, I would want to say, like, one, there is always an opportunity for you to figure out a way to create outcomes off of the work you do today. You're just not thinking about it that way. So I would maybe challenge again to have some of that open space. Use ChatGPT or Claude as a thought partner. I think for anyone who's feeling stuck in this new space, the one thing that I love about these tools is they help you really just start to organize your thoughts and they help you kind of think about these things. And so I would just put in, what are you thinking? What do you do? What could that look like? I think that's the thing. It's like for lack of a plan, for lack of an example, that can feel very stressful. And so with that, start to think about that. Start to talk about it with your peers, your colleagues, your boss, your friends, your family. Get some more ideas of how other people are thinking about it with their own
Yeah.
personal career, and that will help you shift and think about how do you need to start thinking about it with your careers, because this will ultimately be something really incredible for you. But if you stay in that fear-based resist mode, it's going to feel hard, and you're probably going to feel it'll become a self-fulfilling prophecy. Like you
Right.
won't progress, and then as a result you will struggle, and then it will just create negative outcomes for you, which it kind of be like, oh, I knew this was going to happen all along. And it's like, well, there's two roads, two paths to take right now, and how do you get comfortable with a path that might feel uncomfortable?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you're right. Like we know AI literacy at a minimum is something that employers are looking for at all levels now. It's not, I couldn't imagine that a question doesn't show up in an interview today
Mhm.
where it's like, tell us how you use AI in your day-to-day life today.
Yeah.
And I think there will be very little forgiveness
Hmm.
on people that haven't started to experiment, even in the chat, just the chat function, right? And and it's going to come faster than it did when we went through the .com era, where the question might be, how are you using the software that's available to you, or how do you use the internet to help yourself?
Everyone needed to know how to use Microsoft Suite.
Right,
You couldn't
right.
possibly go for a job interview without knowing how to have Outlook or like Microsoft Word.
Exactly. But if you didn't know how to use everything in
Yeah,
Excel,
that
that
was
probably got excused,
yeah,
right? And I think that's the same thing here. Nobody's saying, can you build me an agent today?
yeah,
Like, there's definitely a portion of the population that can, but that's not, the employer just wants to see, and that can be your current employer or a new employer, wants to see that you're taking this technology in, you're understanding the power of it, and maybe making your life a little bit better. Because I think most leaders, as we're talking to more and more leaders today about it, they are more into the camp of this is going to be a support tool for you.
hmm,
It's
yeah,
not the doom and gloom. This is like, oh my gosh, this actually makes my workforce better.
better.
This makes us get to outcomes in a much more, not just quicker, but the outcome is stronger than it was before, because you can collaborate better. You've got a tool, like you said, that kind of organizes your thoughts and puts it out to the rest of the team. You can put it out to the rest of the team to get feedback and then iterate way faster at a higher level than you could
Yeah,
before. Yeah.
yeah. And it's also so much easier to learn than any of those other tools you've
Right?
already learned.
So
And
much.
so much easier. There's like it's like getting an Apple phone where everything just turns on and links to each other, you know? Like I think if you're feeling worried, it's probably because you just haven't tried it. Like just get in there and start trying it. It's way easier. Like you think of the traditional tools, you had to remember, oh, what's the menu? What's the function? What's the
It's
formula?
a function key.
Yeah, exactly. How do I do this? How do I whatever? You don't gotta do that anymore. It's like if you can Google, you can use AI, and everyone can Google. So it's like it's very easy. And I think because it feels like
Yeah.
such a sophisticated thing, I think people think that there's a really sophisticated way to use it, but it's
Yeah.
actually stupid simple, which is why it's been so successful.
I agree with you. And like we go back to Microsoft, and like I don't think I was ever an Excel wizard, but thanks to AI, man, I can build the best spreadsheets now because I just have to tell it what I wanted to do instead of actually figure out how to do it.
I know. I remember like fighting tooth and nail with James to be like, I don't want a model. And he's like, you are gonna learn it. And now I'm like, ha, I don't need to worry about
I
that
don't need
anymore.
to.
I mean, I
I'm
did
just
figure
gonna
it
tell
out.
AI what it needs to
I
do.
did have to figure out how to do that, but now I don't have to anymore because I don't like it.
Exactly. Yeah. Oh my goodness. What we didn't do like 6 months ago, I tell you.
I know.
Okay, let's close out the episode with another big action for the week. And this does go back to the 4 day week and really thinking about, do you like it? Do you hate it? How would you work in it? Could you work with that kind of flexibility? Obviously, we could go over this again for you, but we're in favor of a fluid work week. I don't know whether it has to be 4 days or whether it needs to be a portion of 5 or a portion of 7. I don't care, but it's about the outcomes. And
Mhm.
that really works nicely for us at League.
Even just me as a human, it's like
It is.
having to squeeze my personal, more chaotic tornado style of like thinking about things and working and like when my energy is and things like that into a traditional 9 to 5, I felt like such a struggle for me personally. Like that's just not how I work
That's a good
best.
point.
And so I am so excited, and I feel like people who are like me are so excited. I don't know, like my husband's in the opposite camp. He is more like he is very like routine and scheduled and process oriented. And
Right.
so I'm curious to hear like from individuals in that side of the camp, how do they feel about this change? Because for me, I'm just like, yeah,
But
anarchy,
it is a
bring
good point.
unstructured. I love it. Yeah.
But like I think there will be certain jobs like your husband's that, works off of a much larger system and other people coordinating around the world
Yeah.
that you can't. That's a job just like nurses and doctors. Like,
Yeah.
they're not going to a 4 day work week. They already have an unscheduled, it's very scheduled, but I mean like it's not
It's
traditional.
structured in a certain
Exactly.
way.
Not 9 to 5, obviously. So there's lots of jobs. This doesn't apply to all jobs
Yeah.
and it doesn't apply to all businesses.
Yeah.
But like in a culture like ours, one of the things that I think is very cool is not one, like if you're working on something at 10 o'clock at night and I'm working on something at 6 in the morning, the next morning, different things. Nobody ever says, why are you working outside of hours? They're like, oh, cool. That was your time when your brain was like on fire and getting like all this stuff done. And I'm very obvious. I'm always a morning person. That's my best time to create. And
Mhm.
so then, but nobody ridicules me for that. Where everywhere else I worked with that 9 to 5, which I've never fall, I just never liked 9 to 5, is like people are like, oh, you shouldn't do that. And I'm like, but if that's the best time for me,
Yeah.
to work and do the best job I can for my company and my team,
I'll do
why
it then.
shouldn't I? Right?
And
Because
I
2 o'clock in the afternoon, I'm having a nap. No, I'm
yeah.
just kidding.
Well, no, but I mean, like,
It's
yeah,
not my best time.
but I think that's the thing. And I think the key thing on the flip side is the trust and the culture element because you are
Mm-hmm.
working always. Like, Shannon messaged you, like, she says 6, I think, just to like seem like a normal human on this podcast. Like, I'm getting messages at 4:30 sometimes, like 5:12. Like, it's like she's not just a 6 a.m.er. She's like, do you sleeper is what is like, do you sleep? And so, with that though, like, so you got to go do something in the afternoon. You got stuff to go do.
Right.
Yeah, I trust you. I know you're getting, like, I'm not tying a butts in. I think it's that butts in seats or that
Yeah.
performative. Like, what are your hours? How am I tabulating my mind if you've done 8 hours versus this versus that? It's like, I know what we're getting out of the outcomes we're driving, your commitment to this organization, like what the value you bring. Like that is what matters. And if she wants to do work early, cool. I trust you're doing more than you should be doing anyways on the baseline. You know what I mean? I trust that you're working harder than 9 to 5 corporator
Well,
is going to be doing. You know
or
what I mean? And so it's just like
working,
whatever.
let's put it this way. I think it's not working harder. I
You're
think
right. It's
you're
not working hard.
doing
You're
what is
contributing.
required to
Yes.
get us where we
Where
want to
we need
go
to
as
be.
an organization.
Exactly.
Right?
I know you're
And right
doing,
now, it takes X type of
yes.
work to get that done. 6 months from now, it might take something different.
And I hope
But
it doesn't take some of the same type of work that we have to do
yeah,
today in
yeah, for
the
sure.
future because no one
Yeah,
wants to have to start up life forever. You know what I mean?
right.
But
Right.
with
It needs
that,
to evolve.
it
Or
needs to evolve. Yeah, you have to be able to evolve
can't
and
be a
just
startup forever.
You can't. Just from a pure
By
burnout perspective,
definition,
you
it's just
can't.
not that.
You can't. But I think that's the other piece. Like if you're taking this more into a more traditional space where those probably have stronger signals or stronger undertones in your culture, because that kind of has just always been the way, you need to think about it differently. One as a person, because I think when people are really early, they worry about what people think and what they see. And
Yeah.
then they're like, oh God, I've already been working for like 10 hours, but I feel like I can't log off because it's earlier
Yeah.
than the norm. And then people will notice that.
And then they
They're not
just do,
awake when I'm working, so they won't notice that I'm
right?
awake, you know? And so, how do you, create the communication around that? I think communication is the biggest thing. How do you communicate effectively?
Yeah.
Like, what that is for you? How do you have that relationship chat where you set these kind of boundaries, standards, conversation, like expectation setting across from you and your team, your leader, whomever, so that everyone's in the know. I think that's the biggest thing is just like if there is lower trust or you are trying to worry about that, over communicating is always a helpful bridge. And then hopefully you guys move
Right.
past that where that's not necessary anymore because then the proof points are there to show that outcomes are being met. Like this isn't a problem. Like, yeah.
Yeah. You know what else, as you were saying that, is like, you know what it really comes down to? Is
Yeah.
hiring the right people.
Yes. Yes.
Right? And I often, and rightfully so in the busyness of a day, it is quite often that you get rushed to a hiring decision or you don't spend enough time really getting to know somebody before you make a decision on them hiring. But if you hired someone who had that same mindset,
Hmm.
then you never have to worry. Like you don't even have to communicate it because you hired the right person. Not that you wouldn't communicate it, but you don't have to because the person just naturally leans in to outcomes and making sure that they're doing all the things they need to get the set outcome, whatever that is, done for the company or moving the organization in a way
Yeah.
that meets the vision, meets the
Yeah.
goals of the entire organization.
Well, and I love that you just brought that up because I think that points back to our anchor of culture. At the end of the day, if you
Yeah,
haven't defined those attributes, if you haven't defined, because it's not a resume, it's not a what have you done, it's not an how impressive do you sound, it's who are you as a person, what are your values, and how do you show up for yourself and for others? Like those are different kinds of things in a hiring spectrum, and you don't always, and sometimes you don't always get it right in that. And so I think the other thing going back to culture is the lowest behavior you accept becomes your default culture. So it's not just hiring and hoping for the best, it's also managing that culture
yeah,
appropriately and managing it intentionally and then making hard decisions when things don't work out. Like you have
that's
to
right.
make the right choices to maintain that culture. Like you have to treat it like pretty ruthlessly. Like you have to treat
Hmm.
it as something of value and you have to treat it as something that you value and trust actually gets you further.
That's a good point.
Yeah.
So I think that's a point to end on.
Yeah.
All right, well, thanks everyone. Really appreciate you staying tuned. This was a great conversation about culture. I don't think that's what we thought we were going to talk about today, but it really went there. Thanks, Bree.
Yeah. Well, talk to you guys later.
Bye, everyone.